everybody. It's so great to see a packed house. We expect nothing less. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm a consultant with the festival, and I'm really excited that we get to talk to Glenn Close today. Aren't you? So as usual, I'm going to kick off with some questions, and then we'll save some time at the end for some audience questions. So please be thinking of nice, smart questions for Glenn at the end. Glenn, congratulations, first of all, on The Wife, which I hope a lot of people here saw last night. I'm going to start a little bit earlier in your career, if that's okay. We know you got your start in the theater, and was that because it was just a great training ground, or did you have a particular love for the theater when you'd been growing up?
I didn't see much theater when I was growing up, but I went to a wonderful liberal arts school in Virginia called the College of William and Mary, and they had a very, very good theater program there, and a beautiful theater. And I majored in theater there for 4 years and minored in anthropology. And I knew that I always wanted to be an actress, but I also felt that there was other things about the world that I wanted to learn, and I never thought of movies. I thought of theater. So my first job was in New York that fall after I graduated.
And what did you love about the theater, especially in those early years? Do you like that immediacy with the audience? And I had a wonderful.
It is funny that I never thought I'm going to be a movie star. I thought I want to be an actress, and I've always lived on the East Coast. As a place to go, for that kind of training and that kind of possibility was New York. So that's where I went.
And then you had your first meaty film role at the age of 35 in World According to Garp. Was that a scary transition to walk onto your first film set?
I don't think I was 35.
Was I 35? Maybe IMDb is wrong. Okay. You were in your 30s, perhaps.
Yeah. Maybe I was 34. It was a terrifying transition. The director, George Roy Hill, had seen me in a musical, actually, called Barnum. And I went to audition for him, and it was a terrible audition. The casting people had told all the agents they're looking for a young Katharine Hepburn. So I went in there and just talking like that. But then they had a reading around a table, and my best friend at the time, the actress Mary Beth Hurd, who I had understudied in my first job, she ended up being cast as Garp's wife, and I got the part of Jenny Fields. The funny thing was that the morning after the reading, both Mary Beth and I received a beautiful box of wine saying thank you from George Roy Hill. And first of all, we didn't want to call each other because we didn't know what it meant. We thought maybe it was a consolation
gift.
Thank you, but. And then we couldn't help ourselves, and we said, "Did you get something today?" "Yes." "Did you?" "Yes." And then we found out after that we both had been cast.
And how did George Roy Hill talk to you before you started working together? Did he have advice on changing any technique he had seen in the theater?
Well, it was really interesting. In this case, it was very lucky for me because George started out in live television. So that was basically putting a theater event on television live. It was Kraft Playhouse or something like that. And so that was his beginning. So we rehearsed the movie like a play. We went up, they had gotten a room at Columbia University, and they had put down the tape on the floor, just like you're rehearsing for a show, and he asked us to know our lines, and we went through the whole play, and I mean the whole movie. And then when the sets were ready at the old Astoria studio, we moved onto the set, and I remember walking into that glorious old stage and seeing the sets and realizing that they existed because of my character. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'd never be good. They've spent money.
No turning back.
No turning back.
Yeah. And once you actually started acting in front of the camera, did it feel a lot different?
Oh yeah, it was. I remember going up to George and saying, "I've heard that some actors have found a very hard transition from stage to film, and I hope you'll take. I hear that that's true." And he said, "Yeah." The hardest thing for me was where to put my energy, because on stage you're trained to project, and you project an emotion, you project your voice right to the back row. Well, for film, that was a new concept for me, that you didn't have to project. So, and you know, they of course give you a mic, and you have the sound man, and you can just be natural. But the first scene was going at night. It was a night scene, walking with Robin Williams down this long tracking shot, which was a new concept. And you had to stop at a certain point and say a line. It was like, the terror was right here. And also across the street was a huge crowd, because Robin was so famous from Mork and Mindy.
Oh, yes. Did you get Mork and Mindy in Switzerland?
Yeah, so that was a whole other element. And I remember that I was talking too loud, you know, but it took me a while to adjust. Yeah, to learn that thought is incredibly powerful, and you don't have to be loud, you can just be yourself.
Yes. And from there you had the film bug from that film?
Well, you know, I was grateful for whatever job came next. You know, I've always, actually I think right after GARP came out, I was offered a role in a movie for television. And this was in like the early 80s. And there was a big gap between the world of television and the world of film. And I thought it was an extremely good script. And I told my agent that I wanted to do it. He said, it's going to ruin your movie career.
Which back then might...
Well, but my answer has always been, but Judi Dench does it.
It's good enough for Dame Judy.
Yes. Why can't we? So I've always just gone where I thought the material was good.
I'm going to skip around because you've just done too many fabulous films. We can't talk about each one. Obviously, we'd be here for days, which we wouldn't mind, but you're probably busy. I, of course, have to ask a little bit about Fatal Attraction. And I've read a lot about how you're quite careful in researching roles. And, you know, this woman, Alex, is quite complex and goes to a very dark place. But you tried to do real psychology for her, didn't you? How did you prepare for that one?
Well, make me think about, I don't know if you know the news, but there's been another terrible, terrible shooting in Las Vegas, which is just such a nightmare. And apparently it was not an act of terrorism, so that means it was probably somebody who was in some way mentally disturbed and hasn't gotten help. And that makes me very angry. It also makes me very angry. I'm getting a little bit off the subject, but not terribly off the subject, that these incidents happen in my country and the gun laws stay the same. It's criminal. Anyway, so the astounding thing to me now, looking back on the research that I did for Fatal Attraction, I took the script to to psychiatrists because I was fascinated by the part, but I thought, would somebody really boil a bunny? You know, that really kind of, I said, that's really over the top. But the answer came back, yes. That can happen. But then the next thing wasn't, what is she battling with? You know, where is she psychologically? It was what could have, but I asked the question, what could have caused that behavior? And, you know, through much, you know, discussion and analyzation, the result was that she was incested at a very early age, the age of the little girl in the movie, by her father. And there's a strange thing about her father in the movie. First she says he's alive, then she says he's dead, and then you see an article about it. So there's strange vibes about her father. But that makes somebody, that could also be a trigger that it would eventually become a diagnosable, you know, mental disorder. But it also, mostly from my research, is that those people, it's incredibly hard to have a fulfilling relationship. You know, you're made a sex object way before you even know what that means. The scene where she spies on the family while he's giving her the rabbit at that age that she was, and she goes and throws up in the hedge. What triggered that to, you know, what did her father force her to do that might have made her sick? So that was the character that was in my heart, you know, and in my soul. And the original ending was that she killed herself, which I think is the correct psychology for a character like that. But then it's a famous story. It tested very badly. The audiences were so upset. They didn't think she was punished enough. So they came back and said, we have to reshoot it, and she has to be killed, and the only one who could really kill her was the wife. So it was a very difficult thing for me. You know, it was very difficult. I thought I was betraying that character. I understand now why they did it, and I think it made the movie a hit. I also understand that it's a question that it's something that you see in the Greeks and you see in Shakespeare. It's the classic catharsis comes from the shedding of blood, and it's a simple, you know, she brought disorder and chaos and fear into this family, so you have to shed her blood in order for restoration to become possible. So, I mean, that to me was a huge lesson in what an audience might need to recover. But it meant that I had to die.
Yes. Wow. I mean, it's impressive hearing the layers of analysis that you take into that one character, but in general, do you do that much research and thinking before you hit the set?
I do a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, I just did a run on in New York of Sunset Boulevard. We came back and did it again after 22 years, and it was a totally different interpretation. And I was always thinking, and discovering things up to the last week of performance. You know, that's what's fun and fascinating to me. It's something that, oh my God, of course. That could only happen, you know, 6 weeks into the run. I mean, it's just the nature of, to me, the business and the craft, and we're very complex creatures, humans. So it's a challenge.
I did want to ask you about Sunset Boulevard and why you find it fulfilling to go from film to TV back to the stage, and do you plan to keep doing more on stage in coming years?
I will always do. I always will come back to stage when I can. For me, it's the pure craft of, you know, a platform and actors and an audience, and for me, it's really what kind of connection, real connection you could make. What kind of community do you build in whatever time you have that evening? Every audience is different, but everybody seeks to be connected. I think that's a basic human quality, and so what interests me is how I can, first of all, stories that I think that will be possible, and also then how do I, as an actress, make that happen through the characters that I play.
And in going back to a role like that, and I guess you've done that also in Albert Nobbs. You played on stage, and then obviously we're very passionate to get the film made years later. You mentioned that you keep thinking.
Well, I think that's a luxury. I played that role very early on in my career, and again, it was a very, very different proposition. And I never forgot the story, and it took 14 years to get that on film. I'm proud of it, and it was kind of an amazing process. I hadn't done it, you know, since 30 years. 30 years went by before, and the possibility came up for real, and but before I could totally throw myself back into it, I called up a friend who's a great special effects artist in LA, and I got Rodrigo Garcia, who directed it, and we decided to do a test because I wanted to see if I could convince myself that I could be this character, Albert Nobbs. And it was quite an astounding day, because Matthew Mungle, who was actually went on to be nominated for an Oscar for the work that he did in Albert Nobbs, very simple but incredible in how he could change my face. There came a point, and because I always thought my face would be my burden, that everybody would be separated from the character because they knew my face. And he was doing his work, and at one point I looked up, and it wasn't me. And I started to weep, because I realized I could do this character. Yeah, that there was somebody I hadn't seen before. And so then we went full steam ahead.
Do it, yeah. And what was it about that character, those themes, that you really just were desperate to tell this story?
Well, for me, what I find incredibly compelling are, you know, Norma Desmond has the same thing. Blanche Dubois has the same thing. They're people who have a dream that maybe has developed into a delusion, but for them it's real and it's obtainable, and it keeps them alive, and they believe. They are believers, and they have no self-pity, which I think it's very compelling to see somebody who believes so completely and has no self-pity. And yet, us watching this delusion, you know, deconstruct, is mesmerizing. And at the same time, you have a character that people can really feel empathy for. Not sympathy, but empathy.
I think that line, I'm going to jump ahead to the wife, because this woman, Joan Castleman, that you're playing, I think, yeah, we don't necessarily feel sorry for her. She doesn't want our pity, but she's this strong woman going through a sort of crisis moment in her life, and this is another passion project for you that you've been on board for several years, I think before the director, Bjorn Ranke, came on. Why was this an important project for you, The Wife?
Well, it's rare to have this kind of story for a woman my age, and it was really interesting. It was fascinating. I couldn't, you know, I had to figure out. My first question was, why did she stay with him? What makes her stay? I don't know if I believe it. I knew that would be the first question that every woman asked. And then also near the end, why doesn't she go public? You know, so those two and so the whole process of digging deeper and deeper and understanding what their relationship was, and understanding how it's there's a complicity there. Then you start having something that's really fascinating and complex, and I think authentic.
And I love the performance you have with Jonathan Pryce. Can you tell us a little bit? Is this the first time you've worked together that closely?
It is. And I was thrilled to work with him. I just happened to see him do Shylock and Merchant of Venice weeks before we started, and it's a performance I will never forget. It was revelatory, and he was magnificent. So he is a great actor. And I was very grateful for the fact that he supported me in a movie called The Wife. I mean, frankly, he wasn't American. No. Couldn't find an American actor who would do that. But it was definitely an incredible, it was teamwork. He had the courage as an actor to not ask for the audience's pity or sometimes even understanding. But I think what he does in it breaks my heart. I think I now understand. I mean, I think I have a real understanding of that relationship. In the very beginning, he asks, how can you love someone who you don't think has talent? And she says, oh, but I love you. And then they fall into this you know, I can't think of the word. They fall into the pattern, you know, of their creative life that has deep repercussions. But the last thing he asks her is, do you love me? And when she says yes, he says, how will I ever know? You're such a good liar. How will I ever know? And I so understand that, you know, where that's coming from, because I think it basically is him saying, I don't think I ever have been worthy of your love. And I think women, you know, she sensed that, and she was always, I mean, you could say she was his servant, but she was always, you know, she's also bucking him up, you know, and in very subtle ways that he was aware of as well. But for him, it was difficult. Yeah, I mean, everything has another side.
Yeah, it felt like such a true portrait of what one marriage might look like. Not every marriage, obviously.
It was a hard scene. It was really a hard scene because we had just had this fight, and I just said to him I was going to pack and I was going to leave, and then he says, do you love me? And as an actress, I went, of course, you have to, yes. You know, I'm not going to say no. I think she did. I mean, it was just very real. And I think my kind of astonishment that I felt just naturally was probably what that character would have felt. You know, you're just put in this place. And
From the outside, I'm really enjoying the past few years of the films you've made. You do something like Guardians of the Galaxy, playing an intergalactic leader, and then you'll do something like The Girl with All the Gifts, which was a zombie film, in which you're not playing a zombie, to be fair, she's playing a scientist, and then The Wife. How are you choosing your roles at this stage in your career, and are you getting enough juicy parts across your desk?
One never gets enough juicy parts. I don't know. I usually have to kind of hold myself back, because if I read something after 10 pages, I'll kind of know that I want to do it. I thought Girl with All the Gifts was a wonderful script.
That's great.
And I remember my agent saying, I'm sure you won't want to do this, you know, it's a zombie movie. And I went back and said, I want to do it. He said, really? And then I Skyped with the director, and I really liked him. I really liked him, and I thought he'd be fun to work with. So I did it, and we had a fantastic time. Patty Considine, I mean, Gemma, she was wonderful. It was a great. I mean, I really care about who I'm spending my time with, and that to me is next to the materials the most important thing of all, because that's the process, right? You have to really, really enjoy who you go to work with every day.
And at your age, are you getting like some nice roles being offered? Enough of them? Do we need more films about adults being made, or do you see enough?
Do you think the answer is to that?
I think the answer is yes.
That's a rhetorical question. No, I mean, it's really going to be interesting. I mean, it's interesting. My generation of actresses, I think we're at the peak of our power. And what material will come forth for us, we just, you know, I've developed a lot of things and produced things for television, but Knobs was the first thing that I developed that I ended up being in myself. So when I think, having watched the Emmys just the other day, where you had Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman and two other wonderful actors who had come together and developed that piece of material.
Big Little Lies.
Yeah, I think that's all wonderful. I think if you don't want to sit around and wait for something to come along. I think it's really, really good to be proactive and develop and seek out materials yourself.
Do you think you will produce again, or anything coming up that you're pushing that much?
Not right now, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, I'd like to write another script. I have to just carve out the time to sit down and do it. But yeah, I mean, it'd be lovely to do that again.
You mentioned before, and I think it's obvious to everybody, that we know how much the TV world and the film world have become a little more fluid in the past few years because TV has gotten so good. And so I want to talk about Damages, because Patty Hughes is one of the best characters I've ever seen in any medium. And was it fun to play her? Were you worried she was too ruthless? Or how did you enjoy that whole experience of Damages?
Just checking my boots, because I wear a lot of Patty Hughes's old clothes. I hate shopping, so I had this incredible wardrobe.
Dressed, so.
Yeah, she's very well dressed. A little bit too grown up for the real me, but it was great fun. It was a risk because I had done a season on The Shield and really enjoyed it, but it was out in California and my life was in New York. And so I said to John Landgraf, who's the head of FX, if you could come up with something in New York, I would really seriously consider it. And it was, I think, a couple of years later that they came and the writers pitched me this story. It was very interesting. They hadn't written anything, and all their research, they were using a male lawyer. You know, they were kind of said, you know, this is who they were basing it on. And I said, well, that's really interesting, because as soon as you make it a female, everything changes. But I thought it was a fascinating premise, and they were going to shoot it in New York. And so I said, well, you know, when you've written something, I'll certainly read it. And they came back with that first episode, which just blew my head off. And I remember I gave the script to Ann Roth, who's a great friend of mine and a wonderful costume designer who is also a producer. I mean, she really gets, and she read it and said, you would be crazy if you didn't do this part. So it meant signing my life away for a possible 6 years. We did it for 5 years. But the writing was superb. The only thing I asked the writers was that, because it was so complex, that they wouldn't have me do something like in episode 3 that then made what I did, that then episode 8, it made that not valid, as I didn't want to, I didn't want to worry about
Be
that.
untrue to the
Yeah.
character,
The incredible thing about what they did is that you knew that she hated bullies. She was incredibly good at what she did. She knew you kind of had an idea that she had problems with her father. And it wasn't until the last episode, after 5 years, because they never allowed me to write my own backstory, they wrote this amazing scene where she confronts her dying father, and that she has not forgiven, and you find out how abused she had been, both she and her mother. So it really moved me. It really made me love that character and realize that she was the one who had been damaged the whole time. And again, she was just trying to get by.
And sticking with that character for 5 years, does that ever become too much for you? Do you want to take a break from Patty when you're doing that, or does it break?
I was lucky that the writing stayed on the same wonderful level. Yeah. I think it would be very, very hard to be stuck in a series and all of a sudden think the writing sucked and you're stuck and you're bored, and that would be horrible. But I never was bored. We worked very fast, which I like. I was able to have my dogs on set, so, one of them at least, and so that was fun, and it was close to home. And there was a great team of people. So no, I loved every minute of it, actually.
I also get the sense you've got a great sense of humor. So should we see you do more comedy? Do you enjoy the bits of comedy that you've done in, say, The Paper or a film like that?
I enjoy it. I think comedy's really hard, and I think if somebody's just all focused on you and you're supposed to be funny, I'd much rather, be true to a character who happens to be funny.
Okay. Then try to
be funny. I always think I'm really not funny. So my daughter is sincerely funny. But yeah, I mean, Cruella was a comic part, and in many ways, what I found, refound in, I always thought of Knobs as a type of a clown, and I thought of, and Norma has had funny moments. I think the best is kind of to mix both, and I think I think the worst thing is to take yourself too seriously, because you have to have air around your work, and even with drama, I think you have to kind of breathe.
Obviously, I know no character is completely black or white, good or bad, but in general, is it more fun to play the bad girl than the good girl?
Have I played the bad girl?
Cruella, for one.
Oh yeah, Cruella.
Yes.
Cruella was bad.
She's not nice to those dogs.
No, she's not. The funny thing about Cruella was the worse she got, the funnier she was. The meaner she was, the funnier she was. So, when they first approached me, I said she should be a combination of Noel Coward and the Marquis of Sade, the Marquis de Sade.
And for a character like Cruella, do you do research? What's the research like for that and the preparation for her?
Well, actually, the original story is fantastic because she's the devil, and she lives in a house where all the walls are black, and there are roaring fires in all the fireplaces because she loves heat. Hence, she loves fur. So, I loved the original story. Of course, the original feature cartoon was brilliant, and I used that a lot. The writing in it was, we had a lot of back and forth about dialogue, and I at one point asked the producer, John Hughes is no longer alive, so sorry, John, but if we could just lift some of the lines from the cartoon and put them in the movie. And, you know, we did, and she was mean. And so that all worked very well.
And is it true you're going to do an Amazon show? Or?
Yes, well, we did a pilot.
You did the pilot, okay. Can you tell us anything about that? That involves zombies again, doesn't it? Or maybe, or is that spoiling it?
Not really.
Okay.
Well, it's in the U.S., and I don't know if he's been translated or he's over here, but there's just a brilliant writer called George Saunders, and he is one of our top, most brilliant short story writers. And he recently wrote a novel called Lincoln in the Bardo, which came out to great acclaim. And I had read him, and I thought, wow, this is original thinking, you know, and very human, but original and brutal, dark, funny. And I heard that he was writing a series for Amazon based on a story that he wrote for the New Yorker in the late 90s called Sea Oak. And I was very excited to hear that he was going to be the writer, and I actually Skyped with him. He was on a tour of Australia for Lincoln in the Bardo, and I liked him immediately. And so I said I would do it, and it's the other reason why I wanted to do it is like a character like I have never played before, and tricky. So we shot the pilot just after I got out of Sunset Boulevard. And I think Amazon's going to put it on, I think, the 10th of November, and we'll see what happens.
Everybody watch it so that we get to see more than the pilot.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about the character?
The character is a little old lady. I did research for what the wig should look like by looking at obituaries from Wyoming. My parents used to live in a little town in Wyoming called Big Piney. I said my hair should look like those ladies. So, and she works at a dollar store in a Rust Belt town in upstate New York, and they do not have a lot of money, and it's day to day. And she has a nephew and two nieces. Both of them have babies, and they all have moved in with her. And she has her job, and then her nephew has a very funny job, which I won't tell you what that is, but he does have a paycheck coming in. The girls are pretty much useless. And I learned from George, that demographic, you don't see that terribly often, but it's that demographic that have become Trump people to a large extent. You know, the people that, the poor working class whites who feel like they are angry about a lot of things. So the first time I talked to George, I said, I guess the worst thing you could do in this is to condescend. And he said, well, I come from a Catholic working class family in Chicago, and he had actually worked in the slaughterhouses, and he said, but you have to admit, if you know someone's stupid, they're stupid. So we did it, and my character, she's very meek, and she just wants everything okay. And none of the girls cook. She just like empty cans of food on the plate. She says they're just lovely and they're very pretty. And the girls go to the mall, and the nephew goes to work, and they come back, and she's dead in her rocking chair. And the house has been trashed like a gang. It's a very rough part of town, and at one time you hear gunshots, and you know, so they think that the gang has come in and literally scared her to death. And there's a funeral, which has a certain humor to it, but it's very black humor. And then like 3 days later, the priest calls and says that someone has robbed her grave, and their first reaction is, why? I mean, it's just Bernie. She's just this little lady. And they go back home, and she's sitting in the rocking chair. And she comes back to have everything that she did not have when she was in life. So she tells one girl, "You're going to cook, you know, and you're going to get a job." And she, you know, and she wants sex.
This sounds fun.
And I have never seen a woman like that having sex with a FedEx man.
Okay, we definitely need more than the pilot of this. Yeah.
That's not in the pilot. Right now it's in the second thing. So
Okay.
maybe he's changed it. When I read it, I said, "Oh my God, I have never read it." And I said, this would be a lot of fun.
That sounds very fun. You worried me when you said me.
Hopefully make a lot of women feel really good.
Excellent. Good
A lot
luck
of
with
women
that.
in Wyoming.
Yes. Women at the hairdressers. I think it'd be a great time to get some questions from the audience. If you want to raise your hand, and we'll bring you a microphone. Yeah, we could go to that lady that's right by the mic, and then to the second row here.
Hi. On the one hand, we hear that, or have an opinion of Hollywood as being this bastion of liberalism. And then we hear these stories of the incipient, you know, sexism, racism, ageism. Is there something that explains this paradox of Hollywood?
What was the first part of your question?
Well, that it's this, you know, liberal bastion, you know, it's where all the left-wing people are, and, you know, Trump hates you, the elite, and, you know, they're all on the left, and then how can you all be on the left, and then it's racist, sexist, and ageist at the same time?
Wow.
How can you solve that?
I don't know if I know the answer to that.
Yeah, I guess, you know, if Hollywood is so liberal, then why aren't there more women and
Well, I mean,
minorities?
Hollywood looks at, you know, Hollywood, when you talk of Hollywood, you're talking about studios, right? Mainly, I mean, that's what people think of Hollywood. The studios are now corporations, and they're just divisions of corporations, and their CEOs have, you know, numbers on a page, and you're successful if you make a lot of money. And I think there's certain formulas for making money. They all seek that audience, which I'm told is the 18 to 45 male. And if they'll continue to make movies because that brings in that demographic. And, you know, traditionally speaking, that's the kind of movies that make a lot of money. What kind of woman does an 18 to 45 male want? Not me. So, I mean, in some ways, it's business. That's the way I kind of cynically look at it, or maybe realistically, I don't know. So I think things are in cycles. I think there was a time when studios were making what we now call independent films, those interesting stories. I don't know if that will ever come back as far as the studios are concerned, but with the advent of cable television and the great writing that's going, that's kind of really a golden age, and there's such a need for content, I think there will be much more variation in the kinds of stories that are told. And then it becomes a question of how you let people know where these stories exist so that they can go and partake of them. So it's a very change. I think we're in a real time of change.
Great, and the second row.
Hello. I was lucky enough to see you in Sunset Boulevard in London. Actually, only hear you because the ticket which I bought was not very good, so I couldn't really see you. You were about this big. And I was wondering whether what I was reading lately is true that Paramount is going to bring the Sunset Boulevard again on movie screen, and whether you will be playing the role of Norma Desmond again.
That is the idea. And, you know, they have signed up Ryan Murphy to direct it, and whether it will ultimately get the green light will depend on the team that he assembles and how faithful they are to their belief that this could be an exciting project.
But you're excited for the prospect?
I'm excited and terrified because it's you know, to translate, first of all, something musical onto film, and then something that has existed only on stage into film is very challenging. So, but he's kind of a genius in a way, and he has said to me, "I know how to do this. I know how to do this." So I haven't heard yet what he means, but we'll find out.
Great.
Hopefully.
Has somebody got the mic already? Yes. Okay. Right there.
Quickly, just over there. Thank you.
Ms. Close, you're getting these tributes this week for all of the achievements that you've made. And one knows, but we feel often that from our personal view, that we are defined often by our failures. Can you talk about what that means to you as a professionally, how you've defined yourself by some of your failures?
I don't think I define myself by my failures, but some of the things I've been in that were failures have taught me really important lessons about, I'd say ultimately about filmmaking and about craft and how to keep an audience engaged and all that. And sometimes your worst experiences teach you the most. So that has been my experience. And I won't say what they are because...
I was going to say, you don't want to name names, do you? Do we have a mic on this side of the room? Is there anybody over here with a question, just to make sure we're spreading out?
Question? You've played, Miss Close? You've played quite a few, I'm here.
We don't see you. Okay.
You've played quite
can you stand
a few,
up, actually, so we can...
Okay.
Thank you.
You've played quite a few cunning, strong-willed, and quite fearsome characters. I'm thinking Dangerous Liaison and Fatal Attraction and so on. Would you say that people, and maybe especially men, have treated you differently thinking you were like them, actually, like the characters?
I don't get any dates. When Fatal Attraction came out, in one of our kind of rag magazines that are in all the supermarkets, there was this picture of me as Alex Forrest, thank God, and the headline was "The Most Hated Woman in America." I was so nervous that they were talking about me personally. But they didn't know enough about me to make that judgment, but they were judging the character. So.
Okay, yeah, if we can. Great. Can you stand up also, just so we can see?
Sure.
There, thank you.
Hi. Probably my most favorite movie is Dangerous Liaison, and I'm always been curious how was filming with John Malkovich, because I think that in the movie you see the chemistry, right? It's something very complex, and I've always been so curious about how it worked with you.
That's a great question, because it brings back such great memories. I first met John in a hotel room with Stephen Frears. It was in New York. He had already been cast, and I had been cast to replace Kevin Spacey, and I had been cast to replace the Lindsay, the two English, Alan Rickman and Lindsay Duncan, who had played it on Broadway, and the producers decided to close it before we could go in. So I thought I'd lost my chance to play this incredible role, but luckily they came back to me, and they asked that I meet John. And I remember him, and I remember sitting across from him as he was talking and think, could I find him sexually attractive?
John's not here today, so
I just saw John in San Sebastian. He was the head of the jury. And actually, we just did a film together that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so I thought, yeah, you know, I have a great imagination. I can. I can make anyone sexy in my mind. And then they started filming as I was giving birth to Annie, my daughter. And I went over to Paris to start shooting when she was 7 weeks old. And I had all my final costume fittings there, which were agony because my body was like a loaf of bread. And I started, there was one scene where the Michelle Pfeiffer character and my character were in the scene together with the concert, and then they had done her whole side of the story, waiting for me to arrive, and then we did all my side of the story. And the first day of shooting with John, I had no clue what he was doing. I didn't get it, you know. And I went to Stephen Frears and said, could I see what you have shot? Could I see the footage of what you've shot so far? And he showed me a lot of the footage, and I said, oh, yeah, I get it. And so then we had a fantastic time. But he is certainly an original, that's for sure. And I love him dearly.
Great. Can we come to this lady in the front who might have come all the way from Italy?
Hi, Glenn. Yeah, I came 2 days ago just to see you. I follow you since I was a child. I was 5 years old, yes, I think, something like that. And I want to do 2 questions, if it's possible.
Okay, but this will be our last question, so they better be good.
Okay.
The pressure's on.
First one is, how many times did you make the second final scene of Fatal Attraction? Because I know you were pregnant or something like that in the second time you made it, right? So
I mean, shooting the new ending.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was pregnant as we were shooting that.
Oh, okay.
I found out later.
She somehow knows.
So I think, okay.
Yeah.
And second one is, can you do Cruella's laugh for us today? Please, please.
Puppies. Puppies.
Great actress and a good sport. I think we have to end on Cruella's laugh. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your questions, but thank you so much for being here in Zurich with us.